My name is Eliza Moore. I'm 32, and I still share a room with a woman I met off Craigslist 4 years ago when I couldn't afford the deposit for a studio. She talks in her sleep, eats string cheese like it's a religion, and keeps a mini disco ball in the kitchen for mood lighting. And still, she's more of a sister to me than the one I grew up with. Last week an invitation came in the mail, cream cardstock, gold foil lettering. The envelope smelled faintly of Chanel. I stared at my name, Miss Eliza Moore, as if I hadn't seen it in years. No return address, just Isla and Daniel. In cursive. That looked expensive. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was coming off a 6-hour shift assisting a wedding florist, still smelling like roses and eucalyptus. My hands were stiff from tying satin ribbons. My shoes, fake leather, $40 clearance, were kicked off by the door. They'd started splitting at the seam. I'd glued them twice. The invitation read, "You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Isla Moore and Daniel Ashcroft at the Briar Estate Saturday, 6 p.m. Formal attire." Formal. As if that narrowed it down for someone whose wardrobe lived in a single shared closet behind a curtain rod. I placed the card on the kitchen counter and stared at it. My roommate, Bina, walked in carrying takeout. Thai. She caught the look on my face and leaned over the counter, reading upside down. "Oh," she said flatly. "The royal wedding." I gave a half smile. "She included you this year. Progress?" "She includes me when there's a photographer. She's gonna do a humble roots caption, isn't she?" I didn't answer. I walked over to the window, looked out at the streetlight flickering over the cracked pavement, and tried to remember the last time I'd spoken to Isla. Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. She told our cousins I lived somewhere in Brooklyn with artists or whatever. She meant me and Bina. I design infographics for nonprofits and build wedding centerpieces for extra cash. Bina's a lighting designer for off-Broadway. But sure, artists or whatever. On Friday, I dug into the bottom drawer of my dresser and pulled out the dress. It was navy. Cotton linen blend, tailored but modest. I'd bought it from a secondhand boutique 3 years ago for a job interview that didn't go anywhere. The hem had come undone. I sat on the edge of my bed and stitched it carefully, tugging the thread through like I was patching my own skin. The shoes. I didn't have another pair. At noon, I walked down Flatbush to the discount shoe outlet. The air was muggy, heavy with August. The store smelled like rubber and glue. A salesgirl glanced at my worn jeans and turned away. I didn't blame her. I found a pair of nude pumps, $39.99, final sale. I paid in cash and walked out. Back home, I cleaned them with a baby wipe and let them dry on the windowsill like they were something sacred. Saturday arrived hot and heavy. Bina handed me a paper coffee cup as I slipped on my shoes. "You could skip it," she said. "Say you're sick or dead." She'd post about it either way. "Fair. Besides," I said, grabbing my tote, "I just want to see what version of me she's telling this year." The Uber ride to Briar Estate took 43 minutes. I watched the skyline disappear behind us. Concrete gave way to manicured lawns and wrought iron gates. Briar Estate sat behind rows of trimmed hedges, its facade dusted in late afternoon light, the kind of house that made you whisper, even if no one was listening. A valet opened my door before I could catch my breath. My shoes hit the pavement. They made a soft scuffing sound that felt louder than it should have. Inside, everything smelled like money. Expensive florals, fresh linens, perfume. A hostess greeted me by name, which meant Isla had sent photos ahead of time. She handed me a glass of something bubbly before I could decline. I stood at the edge of the foyer, watching polished people in champagne-colored gowns and navy tuxedos glide across marble floors like this was some kind of kingdom. I caught sight of my parents near the grand staircase. My mother's hair was swept into a French twist. My father had traded his usual khakis for a navy suit that made him look 10 pounds thinner. Neither looked at me. And then I saw her. Isla. She moved through the room like she owned it, which in a way she did. Floor-length silver dress, diamond drop earrings. Her smile was made for photo ops. She spotted me, tilted her head, and began walking over. "Eliza," she said, her voice loud enough for the 3 people beside her to hear. "You made it." She kissed the air beside my cheek. Her eyes scanned me head to toe just long enough for the others to follow. "I love your shoes," she said sweetly. "I think I had a pair like that in high school." I didn't answer. She turned back to the group. "My sister's very practical. She's a minimalist. Shares a room in Brooklyn with a girl who collects disco balls. It's like a sitcom." Laughter. Someone asked, "Is that real?" "Oh yeah," Isla beamed. "Still shares a room. Can you imagine? At her age?" My age. She was 29. I was 32. Apparently that meant something different when you wore couture. I smiled politely and sipped my drink. It tasted like melted gold and regret. Dinner was served on the lawn, under a canopy of white silk drapes. I was seated 2 tables away from Isla, next to a distant cousin I didn't recognize, and a woman who worked in digital media and assumed I did too. Isla gave a toast after the 3rd course. Her voice was rich with practiced sincerity. "I just want to thank everyone for being here," she said, holding Daniel's hand. "This is such a dream. To be surrounded by friends, by family." She looked over at me briefly, then continued. "We all come from somewhere, right?" she said with a chuckle. "Some of us bunk beds in Brooklyn. Some of us $40 shoes." More laughter. My fork paused over the arugula salad. She laughed too. "Just kidding. Eliza knows I'm kidding." I looked at her. She didn't look away. I folded my napkin and set it on the table. The box was still in my tote, wrapped in matte paper. No ribbon, no tag. She hadn't opened her gifts yet. She didn't know. No one did. The speeches ended, but the echoes hung in the air like the last note of a song that didn't land right. People laughed, smiled, sipped champagne, but they didn't look at me. Not directly. Just side glances, soft whispers behind manicured hands, a few polite nods in my direction. Nothing cruel. Just the kind of silence that knows how to humiliate without raising its voice. A woman in a floral silk dress leaned toward Isla as she passed. "That was hilarious," she whispered. "Shoes and bunk beds." Classic Isla laughed, tossed her hair. "She's used to it," she said. "We've always had that kind of humor between us." I didn't remember that kind of humor. I remembered a 5th birthday party where she told everyone I still slept with a stuffed rabbit, even though I didn't. I remembered her slipping my name onto the detention list in middle school when she got caught skipping class. I remembered the way our mother shrugged after both, like it was just a phase. "Isla's spirited," she said. "Eliza's sturdy. They balance each other." I remembered learning to flinch without blinking. After the toast, people broke into clusters. The kind of mingling that happened in expensive circles, where everyone knew exactly where to stand and how to make it look effortless. I stayed close to the edge of the tent, near the floral archway draped in white roses. One of Isla's friends, a woman with perfect teeth and a voice like someone who narrates spa commercials, approached me with a flute of champagne. "Isla told me you're in design?" "Something like that," I said. "Oh, cool. I could never do freelance. I need structure, you know?" She sipped and smiled. "She said you're more bohemian." That's so brave. Brave. That word again. Like poverty was a battlefield and I'd volunteered. I excused myself and walked toward the side garden. The estate was too perfect. Manicured hedges, stone fountains, lights like stars stitched across the hedge lines. Even the grass looked expensive. I found an empty bench and sat down. The heels pinched. The glue had started to peel again. I slid my foot out, discreetly checked the seam. Still holding. Just like me. "Eliza." I looked up. It was Daniel, the fiancé. He was holding a scotch glass with a lemon twist and looking at me like I was part of the help staff. "I'm glad you came," he said, and it sounded like a formality. "Me too. I know things are complicated, with Isla and all." "All? You two are very different. I've heard." He shifted. "She talks about you a lot." I raised an eyebrow. "Well, sometimes." I waited. "She says you're the quiet genius, always marching to your own beat, not materialistic." Translation, broke. "She admires that, you know." "She said that?" He hesitated. "She means well." I nodded and looked away. He took that as a cue to leave. Inside the estate, a string quartet began playing something orchestral and unfamiliar. People moved toward the ballroom for dancing and more photo ops. The event photographer, a woman in black with a camera that looked like it cost more than my rent, swept through the room in practiced arcs, pausing at tables to pose smiling couples. I watched Isla slip into a new dress, a champagne satin gown with a high slit and a back so low it seemed to defy gravity. She moved across the floor like a polished diamond, and then she called me over. "Eliza," she said, "come here. We need a sister photo." I hesitated. Her voice had already drawn attention. Heads turned, cameras clicked. I walked slowly toward her. Someone handed her a microphone. I blinked. "Is this part of the itinerary?" She smiled. "Impromptu. You inspired me." I felt the weight of the room shift. She held up the mic like it was a glass of wine. "So," she began, her voice rich and sweet and laced with something that smelled like roses and vinegar, "I want to take a moment to celebrate my sister." Applause? Smiles. "Eliza's not usually in the spotlight," she continued, "but tonight she's with us. And that's rare. And special." I heard the restraint in my mother's clap. "Eliza has always done things her own way," Isla said, pacing slowly across the floor. While I was chasing internships and MBA programs, she was exploring alternative paths. Laughter. Controlled. Comfortable. "She once told me she doesn't believe in capitalism." I hadn't, but I'd rolled my eyes once at a Black Friday sale. That was enough. She lives in Brooklyn with a roommate who decorates with disco balls. She owns, I kid you not, one good coat, but somehow she always pulls it off. The mic passed hands. Someone shouted, "Tell them about the bunk beds." Isla grinned. "Oh, right. Eliza still shares a room, in her 30s. Can you imagine?" More laughter. Someone spit a sip of champagne and wiped their mouth with a napkin. She says it's about prioritizing experience over things, but I think it's just Eliza being Eliza. She's never needed much to be enough. She walked toward me, hand outstretched, eyes glinting. "You inspire me, sis." And then she hugged me, in front of everyone, in front of the camera. The click was louder than the applause. She walked away, leaving me standing in the center of the ballroom, with a smile I didn't mean and a face that felt like porcelain. People nodded in approval. The poor sister had been acknowledged. The narrative was complete. The photographer caught up to me. "That was sweet," she said. "Was it?" She shrugged. "She's good with timing." I walked to the gift table, set my tote down, unzipped it, pulled out the small box, matte paper, no bow, no name tag. I placed it carefully at the center of the table. The lights above made the silver embossing gleam faintly. Isla hadn't seen it. Number one had. Not yet. Dinner resumed. Dancing, dessert, small talk disguised as networking. At one point, I sat beside my father. He was cutting into a creme brulee with the concentration of a man solving a national crisis. He didn't look at me. I spoke anyway. "How's work? Busy? Still with the firm?" Where else would I be? I sipped water. "Elisa's speech," I said. "Did you enjoy it?" "She's got a flair for performance." That's one way to put it. He looked at me then, briefly. "Don't take it personally." I didn't answer. He went back to the brulee. I found my mother near the floral installation. She was adjusting a centerpiece that didn't need adjusting. "Eliza," she said, like she hadn't seen me earlier. "Mom, you looked very neat tonight." "Thanks." That speech was something. It was. She means well, you know. I stared at her. She's always just been louder, expressive. She called me a joke in front of 70 people. She didn't mean it like that. How did she mean it? She blinked. Her mouth opened, closed. "Everything's always been so dramatic with you." That made me laugh, softly. "I'm not the dramatic one." Her eyes flicked to my shoes. "They don't look cheap." "They are." "Well, you wore them well." By the time the cake was cut and the final dance played, most guests had already started leaving. The gift table was surrounded by white-gloved staff preparing to pack boxes. Someone called Isla over. "Last photo with the gifts," the photographer said. Isla posed, beaming, hands folded like a magazine cover. Then she saw the box, the small one, matte paper, no bow. She picked it up. "What's this?" she asked. Number one answered. She peeled back the paper slowly, lifted the lid. Inside, a miniature brass key tied to a red ribbon. Beneath it, a folded document. She read the first line silently, then again. Her fingers trembled, just slightly. She handed the paper to Daniel. He read it aloud, at first in jest, then slower. "Transfer of ownership, 189 Willow Lane, from Eliza Moore to Isla Moore, signed and notarized, Vishkin," he trailed off. The room shifted, like a sound had been sucked out of it. Isla looked at me. I didn't say anything. I didn't smile. I didn't move. She blinked. Her lips parted like she had a speech ready, but nothing came out. Isla didn't finish her speech. She stood there, holding the deed like it was a foreign language. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Someone coughed. Another guest shifted in their seat. The photographer lowered her camera. The air went a-still. I turned and walked out of the ballroom. No drama, no applause, no exit line. Just the sound of my own footsteps echoing through tile. Outside, the night had softened. The air was cooler, the sky bruised with stars. I sat at the edge of the fountain where no one else had gathered. Water lapped gently against marble, the sound steady and soft like breath. I didn't need to stay for the aftermath. I already knew how the story would go. Isla would recover. She always did. She'd repackage the moment, turn it into a joke, a quirky family anecdote. My sister gave me a house at my engagement party. Can you imagine? So over the top. She'd crop the silence, edit the moment. She always had. I was 5 when she first lied to our parents about me. She told them I'd broken Mom's crystal vase playing with her dolls. I hadn't. I was in the other room, folding a paper frog I'd learned to make at school. But Isla cried big and loud and dramatic, and when our mother came storming in, she didn't even ask me what happened. "Eliza," she said, her voice clipped. "You're the older one. You should know better." I remember Isla peeking out from behind her, wide-eyed and dry-faced. Later that night, she came into our room and offered me a lollipop. "I picked the flavor you like," she said. Green apple. I took it, not because I forgave her, because it was easier. Isla was always the center, of attention, of praise, of orbit. At every family gathering, she wore dresses that shimmered and danced and made her look like something you'd see in a window display. I wore navy tights and cardigans with loose buttons. At her birthday parties, she got bakery cakes in the shape of castles. I got sheet cakes with our names written in the same color icing. When I won first place in the 5th grade science fair, Mom couldn't come. Isla had a ballet recital. I showed Dad my ribbon that night over dinner. He nodded once and said, "Good job," before asking Isla how her performance went. She described her solo with the flair of a courtroom prosecutor. He clapped when she finished. I still have the ribbon. It's folded inside a copy of Jane Eyre I bought from a library clearance bin, page 198, where Jane says, "I am no bird and no net," ensnares me. In high school, Isla convinced our mother to buy her a prom dress that cost more than my entire wardrobe. "You can just wear the one you wore to winter formal," she said. I had, 2 years in a row. That summer, I got a part-time job at the library. Isla interned for a local fashion designer and posted daily photos captioned "Number Future Icon." I saved every paycheck, bought myself a pair of sneakers and a secondhand laptop. Isla borrowed the laptop to write college application essays. She got into Stanford. I didn't apply. It wasn't always malicious. Sometimes it was worse than that. Sometimes it was passive, casual, so soft it felt almost accidental. Like the year she studied abroad and needed extra tuition. My parents pulled from the college fund. "We'll make it up to you," Dad said. They didn't. They couldn't. I enrolled in a local community college, took night classes, and commuted 2 hours each way. I worked at a coffee shop. Isla sent postcards from Florence with photos of pasta and cathedrals and men who looked like they came from perfume ads. "Wish you were here," she wrote once. I believed her. Back then, I still wanted to be missed. Our grandfather died the year I turned 22. He lived alone in a yellow house with crooked shutters and a porch swing that creaked when you sat too hard. He had arthritis in both hands and a garden he refused to let anyone else touch. Isla visited once in his final months, for 20 minutes. She posted a photo of him holding a mug of tea with the caption, "Treasure your roots." I was there every weekend, driving upstate in my dented car with a bag of groceries and a borrowed medical handbook. I learned how to change his oxygen tubes, how to make his favorite soup, how to speak without condescension when he forgot what day it was. He left us both something in his will, a letter and a key, but only one key was handed over. Mom said, "It just makes more sense. She's building a life now. You understand, right?" I nodded, because I always did. When I turned 25, I left. I packed a duffel bag with 2 pairs of jeans, 5 t-shirts, and my laptop. I rented a room in a brownstone in Brooklyn with 2 strangers. One of them turned out to be Bina. She taught me how to pan-fry tofu and decorate with secondhand art. We split bills, fought over fridge space, watched documentaries on Wednesday nights. When my freelance income dipped, she covered rent without asking for anything but a hug. Sometimes kindness comes from people who owe you nothing. Sometimes love looks like someone saving the last dumpling for you. Last year, Isla posted a photo in front of a townhouse in Park Slope. "Manifesting," the caption read. I stared at it for a long time. Not because of the house, but because she was standing in front of mine. People think you give a house out of revenge. You don't. You do it out of clarity. You do it when the silence in your chest has turned from sadness to steel. You do it when you're done waiting for anyone to notice the years you spent folding yourself in half so someone else could shine brighter. When I signed the deed transfer, the lawyer looked at me and said, "Are you sure?" I said yes, because that house was never mine. Not really. It was a holding place for pain, for sacrifice, for forgotten visits and unreturned favors. Giving it away didn't hurt. Holding it had. Isla doesn't know I worked 2 jobs for most of my 20s. She doesn't know I flipped a studio apartment in Queens and used the profit to pay off a mortgage she didn't even know existed. She doesn't know about the scholarship I turned down because our mother told me, "It's not worth the hassle if you're not going to stick with it." She doesn't know because she never asked, and I stopped offering. Back at the estate, I watched as staff began packing the tables. Guests filtered toward the exit, murmuring in hushed tones, casting glances toward Isla, who still stood frozen near the gift table. Her hand clutched the deed like it might disappear. Our mother stood beside her, whispering furiously. Our father watched from a distance, his face unreadable. Daniel, the fiancé, looked down at the paper again, then up at Isla, then at me. He didn't say anything, just nodded, like someone finally realizing they were playing a different game all along. That night, I took the train back to the city. No limo, no Uber. Just a quiet seat by the window, the city lights bleeding across the glass like smudged paint. Bina was on the couch when I got home, a bowl of popcorn in her lap and a candle burning low on the windowsill. She looked up. "Well?" I took off my shoes. The heel had split again. Speechless, I said. Bina handed me the remote. Want to watch something dumb and predictable? I smiled. God, yes. And just like that, the night slipped into something simple. No applause, no crown, no spotlight, just soft laughter and the sound of popcorn crunching between the people who saw each other clearly. There was no headline, no viral clip, no applause. But that night something shifted. Not at the party, not in the room full of rose-tinted cruelty, but inside me in the silence after. The kind of silence that doesn't beg to be filled, the kind that makes room. The house wasn't a gift, it was a closing. The end of a chapter written in borrowed expectations and bruised silences. The truth is, I didn't wake up one day and decide to outgrow my family. It happened the way weeds push through pavement, slow, cracked, persistent. I just started. It began with the old man upstairs, Mr. Holloway, second-floor tenant of the first building I rented a room in. Widowed. Smelled like cough drops and pipe tobacco. Said, young lady with a warbled affection. He slipped on black ice one morning while getting his mail. Broke his hip. His daughter, who lived in Chicago, called once to say she was too swamped to fly in. So I brought him soup. Checked in between shifts. Handled prescriptions. I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because I couldn't not. 3 months later, he moved into assisted living and left me his books and his rent-controlled unit. I know you'll take care of it, he said. And I did. That was the first brick. I started researching housing laws, tax codes, read library books on property flipping between floral consultations and delivery shifts. Bina taught me how to track expenses on Excel. I watched free webinars with real estate agents who wore bad suits and offered excellent loopholes. Then I bought my first property. Foreclosed. Moldy. Yellow paint peeling like sunburned skin. Everyone said I was insane. Who do you think you are, Joanna Gaines? Isla laughed when she saw the photo I didn't mean for her to see. You bought that? I scrubbed mold until my wrists ached. Learned how to tile a backsplash from YouTube. Found an immigrant contractor who let me pay him in phases. No interest. Flipped it in 4 months. Made enough to pay off my student loans. Didn't tell anyone. Second brick, the LLC. Registered under a name no one would connect to me. Crimson Root Holdings. Why? Because it sounded forgettable. Bought a duplex in a quiet corner of Bushwick, then another on the edge of Queens. Rented to artists and teachers and people who never asked for discounts but always paid on time. Bina handled the legal side. I did the rest. We didn't celebrate with champagne. We split a bottle of $6 wine and danced to Robin in the kitchen. I still shared a room, but by then I owned 5. I didn't do it to be rich. I did it because I needed something that was mine. Not borrowed, not sacrificed, not handed over because someone else needed it more. Ownership to me wasn't about power. It was about silence. The quiet of not having to explain yourself to anyone. Years before the party, Grandpa's house sat vacant. Overgrown vines crawled up its siding like it was being reclaimed by the earth. No one visited. No one maintained it. Ayla once called it a depressing shack. But to me, it felt alive. So I took it. Cleaned out the attic, found a box of his war medals and a letter addressed to no one. Planted tulips in the garden bed he once loved. I didn't post it online. Didn't tell my parents. Didn't tag it #sign restoration journey. I just rebuilt it. A month later, the attorney found the updated will in the county office. Guess you were the only one he trusted, he said, handing me the paperwork. I nodded. Didn't say I was the only one who showed up. One evening, Bina came home to find me staring at the deed. What are you thinking? She asked. I shrugged. Are you going to keep it? She said. I don't know. You worked hard for it. I know. But I don't want it to define me. She poured tea. Then make it an ending. There's a kind of revenge that burns fast. That's not mine. Mine was cold. Long, measured. The kind of revenge that doesn't care if you're watching because it doesn't need your validation. It's not theatrical, it's surgical. By the time the engagement invitation came, I had already filed the transfer papers, wrapped the deed in matte paper, folded a miniature brass key inside, sealed it with no note. The notary didn't ask questions. No one did. And that's the thing about power when you finally have it. You don't need to explain it. You don't even need to use it. You can just give it away. At the party, when Isla stood in front of everyone and talked about my bunk beds and my shoes and my bohemian lifestyle, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt relieved, because for the first time, her words didn't touch me. I wasn't the version of me she was mocking anymore. I'd already left her behind. The house is hers now, technically. But I know Isla. She'll try to sell it. She'll complain about the garden and the chipped tiles and the lack of smart home features. She'll ask our mother, why would she give me something so outdated? She won't understand. She never did. Because the house wasn't the gift. The silence was. I haven't spoken to her since. She's tried to call. Left a message once asking, "What is this? A joke?" It wasn't. It was a door, one I closed behind me. I still live in the same apartment with Bina, still share a room, still rotate the disco ball on Friday nights when we drink cheap wine and order dumplings. I own 7 properties now. One of them has a mural painted by a deaf artist I met at a community fundraiser. Another has a rooftop garden built by tenants. I walk by sometimes, never announce myself, just watch and smile, because I know what I built, and more importantly, I know what I walked away from. Let Isla keep the chandeliers and crystal stemware and sponsored skincare lines. Let her keep the filtered stories and curated captions. I have silence, and it echoes louder than anything she's ever said. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Not so early, not so public. But Isla asked for it. The microphone, the toast, the spectacle. She thought she was staging a performance, one where I'd play the role I always had. The plain contrast, the afterthought, the grounding presence in a room built to worship her, and I almost gave it to her. Almost, until I didn't. I didn't plan for the moment to unfold like it did. I thought she'd open the gift quietly. Later, alone, maybe with Daniel by her side and a glass of wine in hand, somewhere far from the crowd. I thought she'd read the deed twice before believing it. Maybe even call me. Voice lowered, asking if it was a joke. But she didn't wait. She tore the paper open in front of everyone, hungry for another scene, another laugh, and for once the punchline wasn't hers. When she read the first line, I saw it, the flicker. It was fast but unmistakable. Confusion, then disbelief. Then the thing Isla Moore feared more than anything, silence. She blinked twice, read it again. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She handed the paper to Daniel like it was on fire. He read it aloud. Each word dropped like stone. Transfer of ownership 189. Willow Lane. From Eliza Moore to Isla Moore. Signed and notarized. The guests didn't understand at first. Someone clapped, thought it was a joke. Huh? She gave you a house? That's next level sarcasm? But then Daniel stopped laughing, and Isla just stood there, still, pale. The photographer didn't lift her camera. Even she knew this wasn't for show. I didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood on the other side of the room, hands by my side, watching the moment unspool like a ribbon. My parents were frozen too. Dad stared at the paper like it couldn't be real. Mom was already calculating, her eyes darting from Isla to me, to the gift table, back to Isla. Like if she traced the lines fast enough, she could redraw the ending. Someone whispered, "She really gave her the house? Wait, like a whole house? Is that legal? Who even has a deed to a house?" "Eliza does," someone muttered. Apparently. The silence bent, then broke. Isla walked over. Careful steps, her heels sharp against marble. She was still holding the deed, now creased slightly at the fold. "Eliza," she said quietly, "what is this?" I looked at her. Let the weight of the years settle in the space between us. "What does it look like?" I said. She laughed, brittle, fake, the kind of laugh that cracks glass. "You're trying to make a scene." "No," I said. "You made the scene. I just brought a gift." Her face tightened. "You think this proves something?" "I don't need to prove anything." "Then why now?" I tilted my head. "You brought me into the spotlight. You embarrassed me." I almost smiled. "No," I said. "I gave you a house. There were cameras, sure. There were ears leaning too close. But I didn't raise my voice, didn't flinch. Mob doesn't write revenge with raised fists. He writes it with calm hands, soft eyes, and words sharpened like scalpels. That's what this was. Surgical. "You've hated me for years," Isla whispered. "No," I said. "That would take too much energy." "Then what is this?" "It's peace." She blinked. "Peace? I don't want anything from you. Not respect, not acknowledgement, not even apology. I just wanted to be done. You think giving me Grandpa's house makes us even?" "No," I said. "There is no even. There's just enough." "Enough what?" "Enough pretending I ever owed you silence." People had stopped dancing. The quartet had drifted into background noise. The night had a different rhythm now, one built not on choreography, but on tension. I could feel it in my bones. Not fear, not shame, closure. Daniel stepped closer. His voice was careful, controlled. "You really gave her the house?" "Yes." "Why?" I looked at him. "Because sometimes it's more powerful to give away the thing they think you're trying to take. Because I had already won the moment I realized I didn't need it anymore. Because I didn't want to carry the weight of memory in brick and wood. Because Isla had been trying to paint me as small for so long, she forgot how tall silence could stand. I didn't say any of that, just, she needed it more than I did." My mother approached, fingers twitching at the hem of her sleeve. "Eliza, this is cruel." "No," I said. What's cruel is raising 2 daughters and only seeing one. Her breath hitched. You're being ungrateful. I know. You think this makes you righteous? No, I said. It just makes me finished. I turned back toward Isla. She hadn't moved. Her hands were still clutching the deed like it might vanish if she blinked too long. This doesn't make you better, she said. I know. This doesn't make you right. I don't need to be right. Then what do you want? I looked at her. Really looked. The girl who got the last slice, the louder voice, the shinier dress, the easier love. What did I want? I wanted her to stop thinking I was waiting for her to change. I wanted her to understand I'd stopped asking questions years ago, and I wanted her to know I walked into that party already free. But again, I said none of it. Just nothing. And that's what broke her. Not the house, not the silence, not the eyes watching from the corners of a ballroom that no longer belonged to her, but the realization that I wanted nothing from her, not even credit. Isla turned, walked back to the gift table, placed the box down gently, and left the ballroom. Not a slam, not a scream, just a quiet exit, the kind that echoes longest. I stood for a few more minutes, then walked toward the door. As I passed, my mother reached out and touched my arm. Eliza, she said. I paused. She opened her mouth, closed it. I nodded, and walked away. Outside, the sky was black velvet and scattered stars. My Uber driver was waiting, engine humming, eyes on his phone. He didn't recognize me, didn't ask if I'd had a good night, didn't try to make small talk, just drove, and it was perfect. At home, Bina was asleep, a bowl of popcorn beside her, the disco ball turned off. Our room smelled like lavender and curry. I slid off the shoes, tucked them under the bed, folded my dress over the chair, crawled under the blanket, and exhaled. There would be fallout, family calls, passive-aggressive texts, long silences, then longer ones, and eventually a new narrative, one that twisted my gesture into jealousy, pettiness, or guilt. Let them. They're still playing for attention. I left the game months ago. The first message came the next morning. One line. From Mom. We need to talk. I didn't reply. By noon, Isla had posted a photo from the engagement party, a filtered image of her and Daniel framed by orchids and string lights. Her caption read, surrounded by love, grateful beyond words. Engaged, life, ching grateful heart. The box wasn't in the shot, neither was I. Daniel sent a text. I didn't know. About the house, or about everything else. I stared at the message for a long time. Typed, deleted, typed again. Then just, I know. He didn't answer. That was enough. Dad called 3 days later. I watched the phone ring, 5 times, then voicemail. No message. Silence does something strange when you choose it first. It feels like power at first, then freedom, then loneliness in a shape you didn't know you recognized. On the 5th night, Bina came home to find me on the floor, surrounded by printouts, spreadsheets, maps, architectural sketches, property tax schedules. She looked at the mess, then at me. You buying a mall? I smiled, shook my head. Just planning. She sat beside me, cross-legged in her linen pants and oversized hoodie. You okay? She asked. I shrugged. Feel like you've been not here since the party. I gave away a house. I remember. And a version of myself. That part's harder. I nodded. The thing no one tells you about closure is that it's quiet. No dramatic credits, no thunderclap, no final hug, just a stillness. And sometimes, in that stillness, you see who you've become and realize you don't recognize her yet. A week later, Mom showed up at my apartment. No call, no warning, just a buzz at the door and her name on the intercom. I hesitated. Bina looked up from the kitchen, holding a bowl of rice. Want me to tell her you're not home? No, I said. I've got it. She looked the same, hair tight at the scalp, gold necklace, cream sweater with a tiny pin near the collarbone, a dove or a leaf or something equally ambiguous. Eliza, she said, like it tasted strange in her mouth. Mom. She stepped inside like she owned the air. Bina slipped out the back. We sat across from each other. No tea, no snacks, just space. You blindsided your sister, she said. I didn't answer. You embarrassed her. Still, silence. You could have spoken to me first. That one made me laugh. Software bitter. You wouldn't have listened. I'm your mother, and I'm your daughter. She blinked. Hard. That house was mine. Should have stayed in the family. I tilted my head. I am family. That's not what I meant. But it's what you said. She leaned forward. There were better ways to handle it. There were never ways that worked for me. She stared at me. Her eyes were wet but not broken. She wasn't used to being challenged, not by the quiet one. Why now? She asked. Why like that? I paused, because she deserved the full weight of it. So I said, Because every time I stayed quiet, you mistook it for agreement. She swallowed. You think we didn't love you? I think you loved her louder. That's not fair. No, I said. It's just true. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She just stood up, smoothed her sweater, and looked around the apartment. The shared space, the disco ball, the secondhand bookshelf, the fake plant Bina rescued from a thrift store. This is where you live? She asked, like she'd forgotten. I love it here. She nodded slowly, then, I hope one day you understand what sacrifice looks like. I almost smiled. I do. When she left, she didn't hug me, didn't say goodbye. She walked out like people do when they've lost a debate they thought they'd already won. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, didn't cry, didn't celebrate, just stood there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the cars below. Silence again, but different this time, not an absence, a boundary. A week passed, no calls, no posts, no fallout, at least not one they were willing to show. Isla stayed quiet. That was louder than any scream. I went back to work. Consultations, design briefs, property walkthroughs. Clients didn't ask about my sister. Contractors didn't care who used to own the house. The world kept turning as it always does, without needing a protagonist. Some nights I missed her. Not Isla. The version of her I used to pretend existed. The one who brought me a green apple lollipop. The one who wrote "Wish You Were Here" from Florence. The one I invented because I needed a sister. Bina said, "You should write about it." I already did, I said. She raised an eyebrow. I pointed to the sketchbooks, the spreadsheets, the deeds. This is the story. And she was right. Not all revenge is fire. Sometimes it's just water, slow, steady, shaping stone, until even the mountain forgets its original shape. Isla sent a final text. You win. No period, no emojis, just that. I didn't reply, because there was nothing to win. Just something to walk away from, and something else to build. There was a moment, about 2 weeks after the party, when I stood in the middle of my room, the one I still shared with Bina, and felt nothing. No sadness, no rage, no echoes, just air. The kind you breathe without thinking. It was quiet. Not the heavy kind. Not the silence that follows a slammed door. This one was weightless, like something had finally left. I'd always thought healing would feel like light, like release, a cinematic breakthrough. But it didn't. It felt like emptiness, not hollow, clean. Like a shelf that had once been overstuffed and dusty, finally wiped bare. And for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to fill it. I stopped checking Isla's social media, not as a protest, not as some empowered declaration. I just forgot. Some nights I'd scroll through photos of people I didn't know, videos of street cats, architecture documentaries, street food, real things. And I didn't think about her. I didn't check for updates from my parents either. Bina asked once gently, "Do you think they'll reach out again?" I shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. What would you want them to say? And I realized I didn't know, because I wasn't holding out for a particular line anymore. I didn't need a bow tied on the story. I just wanted the story to end. I went back to the house one last time, not to reclaim it, not to change my mind. I just wanted to see it again, the truth of it, not the fantasy version. It was early evening, late September. The garden had gone slightly wild. Grandpa's tulips were starting to droop, the soil dry and cracked from days without care. I sat on the front step, ran my hand along the chipped paint of the railing, listened to the birds overhead, the low hum of traffic in the distance. I thought about everything that had happened in those walls. Grandpa's raspy laugh, the smell of soup on cold evenings, the silence after his last breath, and then my work. The weekend spent repairing the floors, fixing the roof, scraping the mold from the basement walls. My fingerprints were buried in this house like fossils, and now it was Isla's. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel triumph. Just a sense of farewell. There's power in leaving things unfinished, in walking away before the applause, in not explaining yourself, in not correcting the version of you they carry. I let them keep their idea of me. The quiet sister, the eccentric one, the woman with $40 shoes and a disco ball roommate. Let them. Their stories don't own me anymore. That month, I restructured Crimson Root Holdings, moved 3 properties into co-op ventures with tenant buy-in clauses, started a community design project with Bina adaptive reuse of forgotten buildings into shared creative studios. Affordable, sustainable, intentional. Number 1 clapped. Number 1 said, "You've changed the game." But one of our tenants cried when she walked into the first space. "This is the first time I've had a door I could lock," she whispered, and that was enough. One Friday night, Bina and I were making dumplings. We danced to early 2000s pop songs. She wore mismatched socks. I had flour on my cheek. At some point she said, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "You've stopped looking over your shoulder." I paused, then laughed. I didn't even notice. That's the thing, she said. You're not waiting anymore. Grief is funny like that. Sometimes the person you grieve isn't dead. Sometimes they're just unavailable, incapable, unwilling, and you grieve the version of them you needed. But when you finally bury that version, you get your arms back, you get your lungs back, you get space. My mother hasn't called, Isla hasn't reached out, and still I sleep better now. I laugh at dumb jokes. I reread the books I used to love before I learned to shrink. I walk slower. I say no without apology. I eat the last dumpling. Some nights, I think of what I'd say if I ever saw Isla again. Sometimes I write speeches in my head, lined with sharp wit and cold truth, but they're never satisfying, because the real power isn't in the speech. It's in not needing to give one. Let her tell the story however she wants. Let mom edit the family history in her favor. Let the group chats go quiet. I'm not waiting for a sequel. This isn't revenge anymore. This is relief. And in that weightless room, the one I once hated, the one I once called temporary, I exhaled for the first time in years and felt like I had finally come home. The funny thing is, I don't think they remember me clearly anymore. Not really. Not the real me. Just shadows of what I was to them. A shape, a footnote, the one who didn't need much, the one who helped out, the one who chose a different path. They probably tell stories now at dinners, in living rooms, at brunch tables where everyone's smiling a bit too hard. And sometimes my name comes up. Eliza. That girl? That sister. That disappointment. That mystery. I used to imagine those moments, obsess over them. What are they saying about me? Do they regret it? Do they finally see me? But now? I hope they don't, because I don't want to be remembered in fragments, or filtered through the lens of their needs. I don't want to exist only in the sentences they stitch together to make themselves feel better. Let them say my name the way you remember a ghost, with distance, with something unspoken, not fear, not guilt, just discomfort, the kind that says we didn't expect her to matter. And then, she did. Bina and I moved last month, not far, just across the river, a bigger space, 2 rooms this time, real ones, the kind with doors that shut and lock and open again when you feel ready. We painted one of the walls dark green and hung a mirror with a chipped frame. The disco ball came with us. So did the laughter. So did the stillness. The old apartment sat empty for one day. Then a single mom moved in. I left her a note under the light switch. You don't have to be loud to take up space. She texted me a photo the next day. Her daughter had taped the note to the fridge. One of the tenants from the co-op building invited me to her wedding. I know we've never really spoken, she said, but you made this place feel safe. I thought you should know that. I didn't go, but I sent flowers, and a note that just said, thank you for making it your own. Sometimes the most beautiful things bloom where we'll never see them, and that's okay. I saw Isla once, by accident, a month ago. I was walking near Fort Greene, coffee in hand, sunlight pooling across the sidewalk. She stepped out of a boutique, wearing sunglasses and a 2-pail coat. She didn't see me. She was laughing, but not the full laugh. The one she uses in public, a curated, camera-ready thing. Someone was with her. A woman I didn't recognize, probably another friend I'll never meet. She looked older, not tired, just like she'd been carrying a version of herself too long. She turned toward the window, adjusted her reflection, and then they walked away. No eye contact, no words, no recognition, and I didn't feel the usual twist in my chest. I just kept walking. I don't think she'll ever understand. Not fully. Why I gave her the house. Why I said nothing when she made me the punchline. Why I walked out instead of standing my ground. But maybe that's the point. Maybe power isn't about being understood. Maybe it's just about being whole even when no one sees it. My mother called again last week. I let it ring. No voicemail, no follow-up. I didn't block her. I just let her orbit. Distant, predictable. A planet that no longer pulls me in. Some days I walk past strangers and wonder, what's their silence made of? Whose approval did they stop chasing? Who taught them how to vanish? And then I smile, because I know. They found the same thing I did. Not revenge, not recognition, but enough. There's no photo of me in the house I gave away, no plaque, no memory wall, no room bearing my name. And that's fine, because I left something heavier, the weight of having to live with the truth, the echo of a gesture they'll never explain, the shame that has no direction to land because I never threw it. I just handed them the box, wrapped, neat, final. I still wear the $40 shoes. The sole's coming loose now. One of the laces is frayed, but I love them. They carried me through something. And I don't replace things that survive with me. The girl I used to be, the one who waited, who folded herself down so others could stretch, she doesn't live here anymore. But I visit her sometimes, leave the door open, let her rest in the green-walled room, the one filled with plants and soft jazz and leftovers shared without counting. And I tell her, we made it. There is no final scene, No last confrontation, no applause, just a woman in a small kitchen, stirring tea with a chipped spoon, her hair tied up and her phone face down, her silence unremarkable, except to her, because she knows. When they say her name now, they'll pause. Just a second too long, because the story they remember doesn't quite line up with the woman she became. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.